87 people stood in the polished garage of the Meridian Automotive Showroom in Charlotte, North Carolina. CEOs from 4 states. Collectors worth north of $50 million each, and at the center of the room sat the 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO. A car worth more than the combined net worth of 40 of the people surrounding it. The hood was open. The engine block was exposed. Claire Hathaway, the newest chief operating officer of Meridian, stood beside it in her tailored charcoal suit. And beside her, 6-year-old Maya held Cog, her small stuffed rabbit, against her chest. A rabbit that should have been with a babysitter, not in an executive garage on a Monday. "We've had 3 teams look at it," Claire said. And her voice was steady, but something underneath it was fracturing. 12 weeks of diagnostic work, $40,000 in labor. Every specialist on the East Coast has told me the same thing. It's beyond hope. The engine is too far gone. Then the side door opened. He did not look like salvation. He looked like he had come to empty the trash. A single dad named Mason Reed walked in wearing a canvas jacket that had seen better years. His hands were weathered. His boots were worn at the heel. Behind him came the smell of machine oil and honest work. And in his arms he carried a single sheet of paper, dog-eared and folded, no bigger than a postcard. 30 seconds later, Claire would understand that everything she thought she knew about the Ferrari was a lie. Press play. This one earns it. The laughter came from the back of the room. Someone whispered something. Someone else smiled. There was that specific quality of mockery that lives in the spaces between polished people. The kind of laughter that does not announce itself, but instead settles into the room like a presence. Mason did not flinch. He did not look at the faces. He simply stood there, looking at the Ferrari with an expression that was not anger, not pity. Something older than both. Claire watched him. She had expected a consultant. Someone in a blazer. A specialist with credentials framed on a wall and a retainer that would hurt to sign. What she had gotten instead was this man. All worn edges and silence. With a daughter clutching a stuffed rabbit like it was the only solid thing in the world. "Who exactly called you here?" Claire asked, and her tone had shifted. It had hardened. "Your chief of design," Mason said quietly. 3 weeks ago. He said you'd fired him. He said he knew who could fix this car. I'm that person." He still had not moved. He was still holding the folded piece of paper. The man who stepped forward was Cameron Torres, the head of Meridian's executive advisory board. Silver-haired, wearing a watch that cost more than most people's houses. He smiled. Not a real smile. The kind that happens right before something breaks. "Mason Reed," Cameron said, and he knew the name. He knew it too well. "It's been, what, 4 years? You're still doing mechanic work? That's actually tragic. You had potential once. Real potential." He turned to Claire. She was watching. The room was watching. "Don't waste your time with this one. He's a good technician, maybe, but he doesn't have the engineering background to solve what's happening here. Not anymore. He never did, really. He just got lucky on one job and has been chasing it ever since." Mason said nothing. He did not raise his voice. He did not explain. He simply looked at the Ferrari, at the engine, at the geometry of something broken that he already understood. "I'll need 8 hours," Mason said. He was not asking. He was not performing. He was simply stating a fact as mundane as checking the weather. "I'll need the lift. I'll need the tools in the restoration bay. And I'll need my daughter to be able to stay." He looked down at Maya. She was still holding Cog. The stuffed rabbit's button eyes reflected the fluorescent lights. "She'll sit by the window. She likes to watch. She won't be in the way." Claire looked at him. Then she looked at Cameron. Then she looked back at the Ferrari. At the problem that had consumed her for 3 months. That had cost her sleep. That had made her question her own judgment every single day. "Do it," she said. The garage erupted. Cameron's face did not change, but something in his eyes did. Something that looked like fear. By 11:14 that morning, Mason was already 3 layers deep in the Ferrari's history. Maya sat on the small bench by the east window, with Cog balanced on her knee. She did not move, she did not complain. She simply watched her father work the way she had learned to do ever since her mother died. His wife, Sarah, had been a surgeon. Brilliant. The kind of person who could walk into a room and make every other person feel smaller. She died in a car accident 2 years earlier. Not the kind of dramatic accident that makes headlines. Just a Tuesday morning on Highway 40. A truck driver checking his phone. A moment that lasted 3 seconds and changed everything. After the funeral, after the calls stopped coming, after the insurance money was divided and the house was refinanced, Mason had made a choice. He could go back to the aerospace engineering job. The one he'd left 5 years earlier because Sarah wanted him to be home more. The one that had never felt like home anyway. Or he could stay local, stay flexible, stay close to his daughter. He chose the second thing. And so he became the man who fixed things in garages. The guy you called when nobody else could solve the problem. Not because he advertised, not because he had a website, but because word traveled, because people noticed, because he was quiet and capable, and he never took credit for anything he did. For 2 years, he had worked in relative obscurity, fixing engines for local collectors, restoring muscle cars for retired mechanics, doing the work because the work itself was its own reward, and because every time he fixed something, he could bring home enough to give Maya a better life. That was enough. Then 3 weeks ago, Derek Hollis, the man who had been fired from Meridian's design division, had called him. "They need you," Derek had said. "There's a Ferrari nobody can fix. A woman is running the company now, new, smart but doesn't know the history. Cameron Torres, the guy who's been running things in the shadows. He's convinced her that the car is done, that it can't be saved. But here's the thing. I know why the car is broken. I know how it happened, and I know you could fix it in a day if you got the chance." Mason had not asked questions. He had simply said yes, because Derek Hollis was the only person who knew the truth about the aerospace contract. The one Mason had designed 7 years ago. The one that had been filed under Cameron's name instead. The one that had made Cameron's career and had cost Mason everything. His position, his reputation, his belief that the world operated according to anything resembling fairness. Sarah had known. She had wanted Mason to fight it, to get lawyers, to burn it all down. But Mason had other plans. He had his daughter. He had his hands. He had the knowledge that revenge, when it finally came, did not need to be loud. By 1:30 in the afternoon, Mason had the entire engine block exposed. The problem was simple once you knew where to look. Not obvious. Not the kind of thing that surface diagnostics could catch. But elegant in its cruelty. Someone had deliberately misaligned a coupling in the fuel system. Someone had used a part with a fractionally different tolerance. Someone had ensured that the Ferrari would fail under exactly the kinds of stresses that a car like that would experience. Not immediately, but inevitably. It was sabotage. Professional and precise, Mason knew exactly who had done it and exactly why. He looked at Maya. She was still watching. Cog was still in her hands. He smiled at her. Not a big smile. Something small and private meant only for her. She understood what the smile meant. It meant her father had solved the puzzle. It meant something that was broken was about to be whole again. By 3:47 in the afternoon, the realignment was complete. The new coupling was installed. The fuel system was rebuilt from the ground up. Mason stood back from the engine and looked at it with the kind of careful attention that only comes from deep understanding. The engine was not running yet, but it was ready. He looked at the folded piece of paper that he had brought with him that morning. He had not unfolded it yet. The moment for that was coming. But not now. Now was just about the work. He wiped his hands on his jacket. He walked over to Maya. He sat down beside her on the bench, the wood creaking under his weight. He took Cog from her small hands and held the stuffed rabbit up, making it dance in small circles. "What do you think?" he asked her. "Should we start the engine?" "Is it fixed?" she asked. She was 6 years old. She did not waste words. "It's fixed," he said. "Then yes," she said. She took Cog back. She held the stuffed rabbit close. She was ready. The moment the key turned, the moment the engine turned over, the entire garage knew that something impossible had happened. The Ferrari did not cough, did not stall, did not produce the grinding, protesting sounds that everyone in the room had heard repeated over the last 12 weeks. Instead, the engine roared to life with a sound that was almost musical. Clean, pure. The sound of a machine that had been returned to itself. The room was silent. Not the silence of nothing happening, but the silence of a room where everyone had stopped pretending. Claire stepped forward. Her face had gone pale. She was looking at the Ferrari with an expression that Mason recognized. It was the look of someone whose entire understanding of a situation had inverted in a single moment. "How is that possible?" she whispered. Mason did not answer. He simply shut the engine off and stepped back. He was not the kind of man who explained his own miracles. He was the kind of man who let other people figure out what they had witnessed. Cameron stepped forward. His phone was in his hand. He was recording, or pretending to record. Mostly, Jason understood, he was recording the moment he was going to need to explain. "There was sabotage," Mason said. His voice was flat, not angry, not triumphant, simply accurate. Someone deliberately damaged the fuel coupling, not in a way that would show up immediately, but in a way that would fail under stress. The diagnostics you paid for were looking in the wrong places. They were looking for mechanical failure. This was deliberate. He paused. He let the weight of that settle. "I can show you the measurements if you need them. I documented everything." And then he pulled out the folded piece of paper. It was not a technical diagram, though it contained measurements and specifications. It was a handwritten note. In his own careful script, Mason had written out the exact timeline, the exact part number, the exact way that someone with inside access would have needed to modify the coupling to create precisely the failure that had occurred. But at the bottom of the paper, Mason had written something else. A dated entry. February 14th, 4 years earlier. A day when Derek Hollis had been working on a different Ferrari. A day when Cameron Torres had been in the restoration bay. A day when Cameron had removed the original coupling and replaced it with the sabotaged version. And then below that, Mason had written out the proof, the part number, the serial code. The exact way that only someone with Cameron's access could have obtained such a specific component. It was not an accident. It was not a mystery. It was a confession written in the language of engineering. Claire took the paper. Her hands were shaking. She read it once, then again. Then she looked at Cameron. And in that moment, she understood that she had been living under a lie for 3 months. For longer than that. For the entire duration of her time at Meridian. "You did this," she said. Not a question, a statement. Cameron's face did not move, but his eyes had changed. They had become the eyes of a man whose game was over. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "The engine coupling," Claire said, and her voice had hardened into something else entirely, something that sounded like clarity. "You sabotaged this car, on purpose. Why?" Mason watched. He did not interrupt. He did not claim his knowledge. He simply stood there, near the Ferrari, with Maya holding Cog, watching the moment when the world recalibrated itself around the truth. "Because Derek Hollis was going to take my job," Cameron said finally. And then he seemed to realize what he had admitted. He seemed to understand that the game was not worth playing anymore. He had ideas, new designs, the kind of things that would have pushed me out. So I made sure his work would fail. I made sure he would look incompetent. I made sure he would have to leave. "And the Ferrari?" Claire asked. "A test," Cameron said quietly. a test of whether Derek's theory actually worked, which meant that if it worked, I would need to make sure it failed. So I modified it. I made sure the car would be undrivable. I made sure that when Derek's design failed, which it did, because I had sabotaged it, he would lose his position. The room had gone very still. Everyone was watching. Everyone was understanding. Claire held the paper, the proof, the confession. She looked at Cameron with an expression that was not anger. It was disappointment. It was the look of someone who had been betrayed by someone she thought she could trust. "Security," she said quietly. "Please escort Mr. Torres out of the building and get his access cards." Cameron walked toward the door. He did not argue. He did not apologize. He simply left, and the room seemed to expand in the moment after he was gone, as if everyone had been holding their breath. Claire turned to Mason. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I need to tell you something. Derek came to me 3 weeks ago. He told me the truth about what happened, about how he'd been treated, about how his work had been stolen. I didn't believe him at first. The documentation seemed to support Cameron's version. But Derek was so certain, so I thought, maybe I should call the one person who might actually know the truth." Mason was listening. He did not interrupt. "He gave me your number," Claire said. "He said that you could solve this, that you would understand what had happened just by looking at the car. And he was right. Because you didn't just fix the Ferrari. You proved what I needed to know. You proved that I was being manipulated." She turned away from him. She turned to the people in the garage. The 87 people who had come to see the impossible car fail. "I made a mistake," she said, and her voice was clear and steady, and full of something that sounded like relief. "I fired a good man because I was listening to someone I should have questioned. I was wrong. Derek Hollis was right. His design worked. His design was brilliant, and it only failed because it was deliberately sabotaged." She paused. She was quiet for a moment. "I would like to offer Derek his position back. And I would like to offer Mason Reed a position as well, as the head of our restoration division. Because if there is anyone in this industry who understands quality and integrity, it's the man who just fixed a car everyone said was broken." Mason did not respond immediately. He was not the kind of man who rushed toward offers or celebrations. He was the kind of man who took time to consider what was being offered. "I need to be able to bring my daughter," he said finally. "She comes to work with me." Claire looked at Maya. Maya was looking back at her, holding Cog, the stuffed rabbit's button eyes bright and unblinking. "That's not a problem," Claire said. She smiled. It was a real smile. Not the corporate smile that covered other emotions, but something genuine and relieved. "Then I accept," Mason said. By 5 o'clock, the garage had emptied. The executives had left. The curious had dispersed. What remained was just the Ferrari, the man who had fixed it, and the small girl who had watched the entire thing unfold from her bench by the window. Maya held Cog up to the car's window. "Cog says you're beautiful now," she announced to the Ferrari. The car, of course, did not respond. Mason was putting away his tools. He had brought his own kit. Worn leather satchels filled with instruments he had collected over years of careful work. Each tool was in its place. Each one was clean. Mason was the kind of man who treated his instruments the way some people treated sacred things. "Are you happy?" Maya asked him. Not about the job, not about the offer, but about the moment itself. About the fact that something broken had been made whole. "Very happy," he said, and he meant it. They walked out of the garage together as the sun was setting over Charlotte. The light was golden and long across the pavement. Mason held Maya's hand. She held Cog. They were walking toward his truck, an old Ford with rust on the bumper and a bench seat that had been worn soft by years of use. In the truck was a small cooler. In the cooler was milk and cheese and bread. At home, in the small house they rented 3 miles outside the city, was a pan and a stove and the ingredients for soup. Not fancy soup, simple soup. The the kind that tasted like home. As they drove, Maya looked out the window and counted birds. That was her ritual. Every time they drove somewhere, she counted the birds she could see. Today she counted 17. 17 birds, she said. That's a lot of birds. It is, Mason agreed. Cog thinks they're all going home, Maya said. Then Cog is right, Mason said. The kitchen smelled like butter and broth, and the specific warmth of a home that had been lived in. Mason set up the cutting board. He began chopping vegetables, carrots, onions, celery. Each cut was precise. Each one was done with the same care he brought to his work on engines. Maya sat at the small kitchen table with Cog in front of her. She was drawing. She was making a picture of the Ferrari. Not accurately, but with the kind of joy that 6-year-olds bring to the things they love. It was red. It had wheels. It had a heart drawn in the center of the engine block. I'm making a picture of the car, she said. I see, Mason said. I'm going to put it on the fridge, she said. For you. The soup took 2 hours. By the time it was ready, the darkness had fully arrived outside the windows. The kitchen was warm and bright. Mason ladled soup into 2 bowls. He set one in front of Maya. She looked at Cog. Cog doesn't eat soup, she said. No, Mason agreed. Cog doesn't eat soup. But Cog says the soup smells nice, Maya said. Cog says this is the best day that ever happened. Mason looked at his daughter. He looked at the small stuffed rabbit. He looked at the simple soup. He looked at the drawing of the Ferrari that was now taped to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a star. You know what? He said. What? Maya asked. I think Cog is right, Mason said. He sat down across from her. They ate their soup in the warm kitchen. Outside, the world was going about its business. Claire was probably notifying human resources about Mason's new position. Derek was probably checking his phone, waiting to hear if the plan had worked. Cameron was probably sitting in his expensive apartment, thinking about how quickly everything could change. But none of that mattered to Mason. What mattered was this moment, this soup, this small girl and her stuffed rabbit, and the simple fact that something broken had been fixed, and the world had noticed. He picked up Maya's bowl when she was finished. He set it in the sink. He turned back to find her holding Cog up. Dad? She said, yes? Cog is really tired now, she said. We should go to bed. I think you're right, he said. He carried her upstairs. The house was small. The stairs were steep. The second floor had 2 rooms. Maya's bedroom with the small bed she had picked out herself at the furniture store, and his bedroom with the larger bed that he barely used because he often fell asleep reading to Maya. He set her down on her bed. He pulled the blanket up to her chin. Cog got its own pillow. That was non-negotiable. Did you like today? She asked him. I did, he said. Was the man mean? She asked. Yes, he said. Did you fix it? She asked. Yes, he said. She closed her eyes. Within moments, she was asleep. The stuffed rabbit was tucked against her shoulder. Her breathing was steady and slow. Mason stood in the doorway for a moment, watching. Then he closed the door softly and went downstairs to finish the dishes. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The drawing of the Ferrari was still on the fridge, brilliant and honest and utterly without cynicism. That was the thing about 6-year-olds. They could see goodness in a fixed engine the way adults could not. Mason washed the bowls. He dried them. He put them away in their place. Tomorrow, he would drive to Meridian. He would meet with human resources. He would sign papers. He would become the kind of man who had a title and a salary, and a position in a company that made things of beauty. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, there was just the quiet kitchen and the drawing on the fridge, and the knowledge that he had fixed something impossible, and that the world had noticed. He was not the kind of man who celebrated. He was not the kind of man who needed recognition. But Cog had been right. Today had been the best day that ever happened. He turned off the light. Outside, the stars were beginning to appear over Charlotte. And somewhere in the city, people were making decisions that would ripple outward in the years to come. But for now, in this small house, with his daughter asleep upstairs and her stuffed rabbit tucked safely beside her, Mason Reed had everything he needed. The engine was fixed. That was enough.